we're going to start where, well, it didn't finish, but you know what I mean. Juve, Milan in Turin, Kev. Juventus probably went into this as underdogs, as crazy as that is to say, but they started brilliantly and will end disappointed that they could only get a draw against Milan.
Yeah, certainly went in as underdogs, being what were they, 8 points behind Milan, yet to win this season. Milan were looking at a perfect start to the season, um, but they did start really well. I was at Anfield on Wednesday night, and it looked as though Allegri had also kept a keen eye on that, because it was almost as if he started in very much, or he had Juventus starting in very much the same way in which Liverpool kind of just battered um, Milan for the first sort of 15, 20 minutes. I think at Anfield they withstood, well, apart from conceding the own goal, withstood sort of 13 shots in the first 15 minutes, and it looked to be a similar sort of approach from Allegri, although without kind of the cutting edge. And I just wonder whether he maybe was remembering some of his previous Juve sides of a better kind of pedigree, because as soon as they sort of tired, and even with Milan losing Simon Kjaer just before half time, once they managed to kind of regroup and come out for the second half, they dominated lots of the ball. And I think Juve will be disappointed, because Ante Rebic, who got the equaliser on 75 minutes, was having a not a terrible game, but just a really quiet game, and without Ibrahimovic or Olivier Giroud to kind of provide that focal point. Rafa Leao actually was having quite a poor game, and I did wonder if it was worth just switching those over. But eventually, corner gets swung over by Tonali, and virtually unmarked. Certainly an avoidable goal for Juventus, and I think that's why they will go away tonight feeling really disappointed that they've not sort of made some ground on the teams that they will be trying to chase for a Scudetto. But it's looking like even with what we said last week, I think it was about how badly they started in 2015-16 with under Allegri. It looks like this year is going to be another season of struggle like the last.
Yeah, it does. I felt so sad and disappointed that it was an unmarked header, because the man, in inverted commas, marking him was new boy Manuel Locatelli, and he didn't do himself any favors with that attempt of keeping tabs on him. But Vito, Kev he pointed this out. Juventus are still without a win in Serie A this season. I saw this result as quite a positive, and in my head that, I don't know, because they got that good win in midweek in the Champions League and then drawing with Milan, I thought, oh yeah, things are okay, but very much not, right? Because they still haven't won a game yet in Serie A.
Yeah, it's quite incredible that Juve have not got a win in 4 league games. And I'll just throw a statistic I've just seen here on Opta, and it says that Juventus have been winless in the first 4 league games for the fourth time in their history. So 42-43, which the city rivals Torino won the title, 55-56, and the 1961-62 season. So it's quite a long time between drinks, and yeah, it's quite alarming that they have this. I mean, I tend to agree with Kev that they did have that bad start in 2015, 2016. So they might be able to bounce back, but it certainly won't be easy. And it shows that Allegri is still trying to find his way with this core of players. With all due respect to Malmo, I think that was a fixture that came at an ideal time for Juve to get a confidence booster. But at this stage, it looks like they're still having their fair share of difficulties in Serie A.
Kev, Juve did fly out of the traps, and I was quite surprised, because you looked at the team, and I think it's probably fair to say it was quite a pragmatic 11 from Allegri. I mean, it's not a great surprise, but Quadrado was the nominal right winger, and when Juventus are really playing their stuff, he's the right back, and I don't know, Chiesa's playing in that position. But did it come to you as a surprise that Juventus were as on the front foot as they were early on? And then secondly, what was it that caused them to stop being so dominant?
It did come as a surprise that they pushed so much. You could see reasons why they did it. Alexandro was extremely positive down the left hand side, and I think that was brought about by Tamori having to fill in the absence of Calabria, and then even with Kalulu taking over after Kier had gone off, he continued to kind of probe down that side. There was an element of maybe they saw how well Tio Hernandez was kind of pinned back by Mo Salah midweek, and Cuadrado was certainly tasked with that. I think that's what they were looking to achieve. But once they'd sort of withstood the first sort of 15 minutes that only brought the opening goal for Morata, but largely because it came from a Milan corner of a wonderful counter attack. Once they withstood that, it almost was as if the belief went out of the Juventus players, apart from probably Dybala, who was continually scheming, putting his foot into tackles a little bit more than what I recall seeing him in previous matches, in almost a way to say, come on, we've had this positive start, just because maybe the two or three goals haven't come, because shortly after Morata scored, he cut across. I think it was Romagnoli, and got a toe poke, which Mannion saved down to his right, and then Dybala had a sort of a shot from outside the area of his weaker right foot that got tipped around the post for a corner. And it does. It feels like the belief drains out of this Juventus side probably quicker than I've ever seen it previously. Probably discounting last year where you could see that, but I always put last year down to a bit of a sort of pedestrian passing and kind of just a sluggishness to their play rather than actually. I think they were probably drilled this week to say, look, this team can, this Milan team can be got at if we go for them and we take our chances, but it felt like they gave up on that way too early.
Yeah, on to Milan then. Actually, just before we do go on to Milan, I want to say I was happy but also intrigued to see Dejan Kulusevski come off the bench for Juventus, because our friends over at the Italian football podcast, Nima and Carlo, did an interview with Sven Goran Eriksson during the week, and he said that he's been told that Allegri doesn't really, I guess he doesn't really trust Kulusevski. He says that he's of the opinion that Allegri doesn't think that Kulusevski can read a game well enough, which disappointing. Hopefully it's something that Allegri, as Juventus coach, can teach his player to do a little bit better, but we'll see. On to Milan. A good comeback, Vito, and encouraging signs that they were able to have this adversity and come back, given the disappointment from midweek of that loss against Liverpool, which we discussed on one of the bonus pods on Patreon. But something about Ante Rebic and this season, he's hit a lovely vein of form, and maybe even when they don't have Giroud and Ibrahimovic, they're all right because Rebic is in this form this season.
It's a promising start for him, and I think it's great for Pioli to see that Rebic is playing well at this stage. Last season, and perhaps the second half of the 2019-20 season, we saw that he would try and fit in Lau and Rebic into the team, and they looked better off as left wingers, but playing that lone striker role was not convenient for them. It seems now that Rebic has probably become more settled in the Rossoneri squad, and instead of just playing on the left wing, he can play up front. And I think with that confidence, that familiarity with his teammates, that allows him to play better. He was involved with both goals last week. This time he scores the decisive equaliser. And yeah, going forward, I think it's important that he can show that versatility and maintain that form, because once Giroud and maybe if Zlatan comes back, I think the additional depth is better, and also Pioli might be able to come up with different strategies to confuse opponents if all three are fit and in form at once, then Milan don't have to have this dependency on one player for goals or for assists. It keeps the opposition on their toes, and perhaps this will help them to challenge for a Champions League spot again, and maybe even in the Champions League bounce back from that Liverpool loss and obtain some results in that competition too.
Do you think this is something that maybe has not been spoken of quite enough about this Milan attack, in that they've got Leao, Rebic, and Brahim, and they're all kind of players who don't have a fixed point of where they play in attack. They love to move about. Must be a bit of a nightmare to defend against, because a centre back doesn't have that point of reference to cling on to. And maybe this is something that people should be talking a little bit more about.
It would be very concerning, especially if the centre back, depending on who the team is and whoever that specific defender is, they might get drawn too far forward or too far wide. So that would leave gaps for the defense. And the way the game is played now with zonal defending as opposed to the man marking system, it's easy for gaps to be exposed and to either play a through ball or break the offside trap in different ways. So that kind of movement from AC Milan will definitely confuse other defenders. And as I was alluding to earlier, I think that's where AC Milan potentially can get more goals. You know, getting these different options and finding different ways to goal be a real bonus for them moving forward.
Kev, Frank Kessie, I think it's fair to say he didn't have his best night. I know he's in contract talks at the moment with the club, and a lot of people were obviously quick to say, oh, how can he demand this much money when he's playing like this? And I mean, it's one game. He's just played at the Olympics as well. Frank Kessie is bloody good. He had an off day, but fortunately for Milan, Sandro Tonali didn't, and he was probably one of the better players on the pitch. He got the assist for the goal, but I don't want to give him too much credit for that, because it was just a pretty standard corner that he happened to find a teammate with. But Tonali's good. He's been good for quite a while now, and there are signs of encouragement for Milan pretty much all over the team.
Yeah, I think when I saw Tonali midweek, he came off the bench and he was very physical. I think they were trying to just kind of, I think they would have already been losing at that point, and there was a lot more of that from him tonight. Like you say, it was quite subdued from Kessie with regards to kind of holding the ball up, and certainly his passing was slow. It was certainly an off night for the former Atalanta man, but Tonali was everywhere. But it was one of those you kind of, your brain's still stuck in this Pirlo comparison.
Oh,
But when you
stop.
kind of see him, but when you see him charging about, you realise that he's such a different player. And it'll be interesting actually if he becomes more dominant from a kind of a, because he's obviously, his body's probably still growing as well, being so young. And if he then because he's got a wonderful passing range, if he can add sort of the physicality to sort of hold players off the ball and recover possession, then he's going to be very important for Milan going forward, particularly if they, say they lost Kessie, due to the contract issues. But it was another impressive game, and hopefully he gets a few more. Obviously, we spoke about Kessie missing because of the Olympics, but it'll be interesting if Kessie retains his place for the next game, because it's obviously everything's coming up thick and fast this week, and whether Benacer will come in alongside Tonali instead.
Kev, I'll stick with you. A slight concern for Milan would be that Simon Kjaer got injured. He's apparently done something to his right thigh. At the time of recording on Sunday evening, we do not know the extent of it. There are reports that he will undergo further tests over the next couple of days. Obviously, you'd imagine that will be done within the next 48 hours. So by the time we reconvene for midweek, who knows? Maybe he'll have played, or at least we will probably know the extent of his injury. But with young Kalulu coming in again, he did well last season when he was called upon, and he did a solid job again this evening. But you just look at that defense, and all right, if he is to play with Romagnoli this season, am I looking for things here to point at and say that's a potential weakness for Milan?
I think one of the big problems they had tonight was actually Kjaer and Romagnoli together when Juventus are trying to sort of break quickly on them, and that injury has clearly come about from him kind of at his age, sort of busting a gut to get back, and something's gone there. Hopefully, it's not. I think abductor muscles in the thigh are a much trickier injury than a hamstring that you kind of can rest up if he's felt it go, because he hasn't sort of kind of pulled up in agony. Um, and actually, that was where one of the positives came from Milan, because I think them being able to switch Tomori into the middle, it allowed some pace in the centre of defence, which against other sides as well will mean that they're safeguarded against the sort of the quicker attackers in the division. And Kalulu, I thought he did really well, and I felt he was let down a little by Salamakers in front of him, because Salamakers kept drifting inside and actually got in the way of Diaz sometimes. And I think it was probably because they were looking for a goal, and Rebic and Leao were having sort of a kind of off nights, or at least so nights. And actually, I was really impressed with Kalulu with his delivery. That he actually went to go to the byline, because it would have been easy for him to kind of go on and just try and do his defensive duties, being young and inexperienced as he is. And I think he can grow into that role. I don't know personally how long Calabria's out for. Until I started watching the game, I didn't realise he was missing, because I got the team news quite late. But I think he could be fine. I think it will. Romagnoli looked like he was a little bit more focused than he has maybe been over the last couple of years, when he's kind of lost his place.